Before we start, please make sure to like this video and hit this subscribe button, so you never miss a story like this. And also comments where you are watching from, how many sons and daughters you have. Thanks. My name is Danielle Carter. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and I've worked every single day of my life like it meant something. Like I had something to prove. And maybe I did. Maybe I still do. But if there's one thing I've learned working in corporate America as a woman, as a black woman, it's this: you can follow every rule, work overtime, bite your tongue, and still be laughed at by the man who signs your paycheck. But what they never expect is that sometimes the underdog bites back. "You're out of line, Danielle," my boss yelled, slamming his hand on the desk. I didn't flinch. Not anymore. Not after all the times I stayed quiet, nodded, played the good employee. But not today. "No, you're out of line, Scott," I shot back, my voice sharp. "I brought you evidence. I tried to protect this company. And you laughed in my face." Scott leaned back in his leather chair, scoffing like I was some junior intern who spilled coffee on the printer. "You think you know how this place works?" he said, mocking me. "You're just an assistant." "No. Not just. Not anymore." The room was tense, you could feel the heat coming off the walls. The blinds were drawn, and the glass office that usually gave a view of downtown now felt like a pressure cooker. His voice thundered through the building like he owned every breath I took. But I didn't back down. I stared him down like I was staring into the eyes of every boss who'd ever belittled me, every manager who took credit for my work, every executive who shook my hand but forgot my name 5 minutes later. "You should have listened to me, Scott," I said, slowly placing the folder on his desk. "Because what's inside this? It doesn't just sink your career. It sets this whole company on fire." He snatched the folder, flipped it open, and there it was. The missing invoices. The offshore transfers. The emails from his consultant that he swore was just here for strategy. But I knew better. I watched the blood drain from his face. "You've been watching me?" he hissed. "I've been protecting this company," I snapped. "From people like you." He stood up, fast, chair crashing behind him. "Get the hell out of my office, Carter. You're done here." I stood too. Calm. Centered. "No. You're done," I said, pulling out my phone and hitting a single button. The door burst open. HR Legal. The CFO. All standing there because I made one call this morning, before Scott even poured his overpriced espresso. They walked in slowly, surrounding the desk, and for the first time, Scott looked small. "Let me tell you something, power isn't about titles. It's not your parking space or how many zeros are on your paycheck. Real power is when you know the truth, and you're brave enough to speak it. Even when it costs you everything. Even when they laugh in your face. Especially then. Because I didn't come this far, work these long nights, to be silenced by a man who got his job from nepotism and thought compliance was just a checkbox. You had your shot to fix this quietly," I said, as the legal team took over. "I gave you the chance. I warned you." His eyes darted to the door like he was about to run, but where was he gonna go? His name was on everything. He tried to bluster, threaten, say I forged something. But it was too late. Because I held the receipts, and the real power. The truth is, they never see it coming when the quiet one fights back. They never expect the assistant to be smarter. They never expect the woman in the background to be 10 steps ahead. But here's what I want every young woman watching this to know. They will try to make you feel small. They will try to keep you quiet. But never forget, if you have truth, you have power. And if they laugh at you? That just means they're scared. Call to action. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever stayed late, worked harder, kept quiet when you wanted to scream, this story is for you. Stay tuned. Because this isn't just about revenge. It's about rising. And by the end of this story, You'll see why sometimes, the one they try to silence becomes the voice that changes everything. I used to believe hard work would speak for itself. That if you just kept your head down and delivered, anyone, would notice. But in this office, the only thing they noticed was who you laughed with at lunch. They didn't want the truth. They wanted comfort. Silence. Compliance. And I was supposed to be all of that. Quiet. Grateful. Disposable. Until I saw the first red flag. It was a Friday afternoon when I found the error, small, almost invisible, buried in the vendor reports. The numbers didn't add up, and the name on the wire transfer? It wasn't one of ours. I stared at it, heart thudding, thinking maybe it was a typo. But it wasn't. It was the first thread in a sweater that would unravel everything. I took it to Scott's office, nervous but determined. I wasn't accusing. I just wanted answers. "Excuse me, Mr. Whitaker," I said, holding the folder like it was burning in my hand. "I think we may have a discrepancy in last month's vendor payments." He barely looked up from his phone. "You're in finance now, Danielle?" "No, sir. I just noticed something. It could be an error, but..." He took the folder from me, skimmed one page, then tossed it back like trash. "This is above your pay grade. You let the men handle numbers, sweetheart." That was his mistake. He thought I was handing him a question. But I was handing him a warning. I walked out of his office that day humiliated, but I didn't let it show. He laughed with his executive buddy as I left, like I was just another joke in his boys' club comedy hour. But I wasn't. I was the only one in that building actually paying attention. And once you see corruption, you can't unsee it. That night, I stayed late. Pulled records. Matched files. Tracked payments. Weekends became blur. I ate dinner in the office, fingers covered in highlighter ink. And what I found? Proved everything. Scott wasn't just ignoring the rules, he was bending them until they cracked wide open. Multiple payments to fake vendors. Funds moved through consulting contracts that didn't exist. Shell companies. Private accounts. It wasn't sloppiness. It was intentional. The real twist? He was planning to blame the whole mess on someone else. And guess who that someone else was? Me. See, while he was smiling in board meetings and taking credit for the quarter's performance, I was the one writing the reports. He figured if it all blew up, he'd pin it on the quiet girl in the corner. No family, no lawyer, no voice. Wrong on all three. I printed everything. Made copies. Kept backups. Because if I was going to go down, I was taking everyone responsible with me. And then I went back into his office. One last time. I gave him another chance. I said, "Sir, I really think you should take a look at this. Before it's too late." He didn't even read it. He just laughed. "You think you're going to what?" he said, practically sneering. "Expose me?" "Sweetheart, this place runs on favors and friends. And you're just an employee. A temp, technically." I smiled. Because he didn't know what I'd already done. Emails had already been forwarded. Hard drives duplicated. I'd met with the CFO. HR legal. Quietly. One by one. He thought I was walking in to warn him. But really, I was walking in to watch him dig his own grave. Let me tell you something, when someone in power tells you you're small, what they're really doing is begging you to stay small. Because the moment you realize your worth, they lose control. And that's what Scott hated the most. That a woman he never noticed, suddenly wasn't scared of him anymore. So, when I placed that final folder on his desk and turned to walk away, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like the storm. And it was just beginning to rain. Power doesn't just disappear when you walk out of someone's office. Sometimes, it grows behind closed doors, in whispers, in quiet phone calls, in small alliances that no one sees coming. Scott thought I was just another employee who'd fold under pressure. He didn't know that while he was busy laughing at me, I was already setting the trap. After that final meeting, I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't even return the folder when he tossed it in the trash. I walked out calm. And that terrified him more than any threat I could have made. Because people like Scott? They expect noise. They're used to drama. What they don't expect is silence. Strategic silence. Over the next few days, I made myself invisible. No extra chatter in the break room. No questions in meetings. But every moment I wasn't seen, I was watching. Every move Scott made. Every email he sent. And more importantly, the people he was covering for. Because here's the truth no one wants to admit in these glass towers and steel offices. Corruption is never a one-man job. It's a chain. And if you want to take down the lion, you have to expose the whole pride. I started with Lena in accounting. She'd always been cold to me, distant, sharp-eyed, never trusted anyone. But she was smart. And like me, she'd been burned before. I showed her one spreadsheet. One fake invoice with her name forged at the bottom. Her face went pale. He told me the numbers were already approved, she whispered. I nodded. You're not the only one he used. That was the moment she switched sides. Because no one wants to be the fall girl. Not when the fire's already spreading. Next was Marcus in procurement. He was nervous, always fidgeting, but loyal, until loyalty meant prison time. When I showed him the email chain linking him to fraudulent vendors, his hands started to shake. He said it was just a bonus program, he said. Said it was off books and legal. It's not, I said. And the IRS isn't going to care what he said. By the end of the day, he forwarded me everything. Invoices. Screenshots. Even voice memos Scott had left him bragging about how easy it was to launder through the little guys. The trap was ready. And all I had to do now was spring it. But here's what no one tells you about fighting the system. Even when you have the truth, it still feels like war. I'd go home every night exhausted, phone clutched like a weapon. I knew what I was risking. Retaliation. Blacklisting. Losing everything I'd built. But I also knew what I'd gain. Freedom. Dignity. Justice. It all came to a head on a Monday morning, one of those days where the whole office smells like burnt coffee and nervous sweat. I walked in early. Sat at my desk. And waited. At 9:03 a.m., I sent the final email. To legal. To HR. To the board. Subject line, urgent, financial misconduct and evidence. Attachments. 47 files. All with names. Dates. Numbers. All traceable. All damning. By 10 a.m., the glass around Scott's office had gone quiet. No more yelling. No laughter. Just closed blinds and footsteps of people in suits he didn't recognize. Internal audit. External counsel. The board president flew in that afternoon. And I didn't say a word. But Scott? Oh, he panicked. He tried to call me in, pretend he was still in charge. You've misunderstood everything, he said, sweating. You're confused, Danielle. I just looked at him, steady. No, Scott. I'm clearer than I've ever been. The next day, he was placed on administrative leave. The day after that? He was escorted out. No applause. No send-off. Just a man in a wrinkled suit, carrying a box he used to make fun of others for holding. But the best part wasn't watching him leave. It was watching the looks on everyone else's faces when they realized who did this. Who saved the company? Who had the real power all along? The first day after Scott was gone felt unreal. People were whispering in corners, acting like they didn't know me, or worse, like they suddenly did. The same people who used to ignore me in elevators, now held the doors open like I was royalty. The same coworkers who once talked over me in meetings? They were now asking for my opinion like it mattered. Funny how fast respect comes, once you burned down the building they thought they owned. I kept my head down, but inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power, not the kind that crushes others, but the kind that finally lets you breathe. No more second-guessing. No more walking on eggshells. Because I didn't just survive the setup. I turned the whole damn system inside out. The board invited me to speak that week. Not just about what happened, but about what should happen next. I told them everything. How Scott manipulated records. How he used employees like shields. How the old boys club culture didn't just let it happen, it protected it. They sat there, quiet, some red-faced, some ashamed. And when I was done, the room clapped. But I didn't want applause. I wanted change. They offered me a promotion. Senior Operations Officer. A corner office. My name on the glass. I didn't say yes right away. Not because I didn't want it. But because I needed to know something first. Were they giving it to me because I earned it, or because they were scared of me now? So I asked one question. What are you going to do for the people you never saw before this? The interns. The assistants. The contract workers who made everything run while execs took the credit. If they weren't willing to uplift them, I didn't want the corner office. Because I didn't do all this to become Scott in heels. I did it to end the cycle. To my surprise, the board listened. Maybe out of guilt. Maybe out of fear. Or maybe, just maybe, someone finally understood what I'd been fighting for all along. They approved a full department audit. Started a mentorship program for women and minorities. Raised internal reporting protections. Small steps, maybe. But when you've been walking in shadows your whole career, even one open door feels like a revolution. And as for me? Yeah. I took the job. Because someone had to sit at that table and make sure the next Danielle didn't have to go through hell to be heard. Someone had to remind them that quiet strength is still strength. That kindness is not weakness. And that sometimes, the most dangerous person in the room, is the one they underestimated the longest. I never imagined my story would turn out like this. I didn't plan revenge. I didn't dream of taking over. All I wanted was to be treated with dignity. But when they wouldn't give it to me? I built a version of this place where no one else would have to ask for it. The thing about bringing down powerful people? They don't go quietly. Scott didn't vanish, he fought. From the moment he was escorted out, he started calling in favors, threatening lawsuits, sending cryptic emails to people who still feared him. He thought if he made enough noise, I'd crawl back into the shadows. But he didn't realize something crucial. Once you tell the truth out loud, you stop fearing the echo. He filed a wrongful termination suit within a week. Claimed he was set up. Said I had a personal vendetta. Even tried to paint me as some bitter employee with emotional instability. Classic playbook. Blame the woman. Question her motives. Try to rewrite the facts. But this time, he didn't control the narrative. I did. The legal team had everything. Timestamps. Signatures. Forensic reports. And behind the scenes? People he'd used and abused for years, finally came forward. Not just staff. Vendors. Analysts. Even a former intern who'd left in tears after being screamed at in front of the whole office. They all stepped up. Because when you see one person stand up to a tyrant, something clicks inside you. You realize maybe, you can too. His case was dismissed. The judge called the evidence undeniably clear and gravely unethical. Scott's reputation? Shattered. The man who used to run boardrooms with a smirk could barely get an interview at mid-tier firms. And me? They called me the whistleblower. But I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was trying to survive with integrity. Still, it wasn't easy. There were days I came home and collapsed. Days I questioned everything. Why me? Why now? What if I'd just stayed quiet? But then I'd get emails. From strangers. Young women in their first jobs. Single moms trying to break into tech. Black interns struggling to be seen. They'd write, "I watched what you did. And now I believe I can do it too." And that made every tear, every risk, every sleepless night worth it. I didn't just expose Scott. I exposed a mindset. That power belongs to the loudest voice. That truth is a threat. That women should stay grateful just to be invited into the room. I burned that lie to the ground. Now, when I walk through that office, it's different. People meet my eyes. They listen when I speak. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Because they saw what I endured. What I stood for. And what I refused to become. And you know what the craziest part is? If Scott had just listened that day. If he had opened that folder and said, "Thank you. Let's fix this," I wouldn't be in this chair right now. But his pride built this throne for me. And I took my seat without asking for permission. Power isn't what they told us it would be. It's not the corner office or the biggest bonus. It's not fear in someone's eyes when you walk into the room. Real power is using your voice when everyone expects you to stay quiet. It's standing in truth, even when your legs are shaking. It's rising so others can believe they can too. The day they unveiled my nameplate outside the executive wing, I didn't cry. Not because it didn't mean something, it meant everything. But I'd already mourned the version of me that thought she had to play small to survive. She died the day Scott laughed in my face. And what rose in her place was a woman who finally knew her worth. Not because anyone gave it to her, but because she claimed it. I took the job. I took the space. And then I opened the doors behind me. Promoted the ones they called background workers. Gave interns projects that actually meant something. Sat in meetings and made everyone speak, not just the loudest men in the room. And every time someone thanked me, I told them, "Don't thank me. Just remember this feeling. And pass it on." I created a truth teller's table. One where silence wasn't a survival tactic, it was a sign you weren't ready to lead. We rewrote policies. Rebuilt trust. And most importantly, we made it safe to speak up. Because I knew there were others just like me. Smart, capable, overlooked. Sitting at their desks every day wondering if anyone would ever see them. Now, they don't have to wonder. They have someone at the top who knows exactly what it feels like to be at the bottom. And I remind them every chance I get. You don't need permission to be powerful. You just need proof that you already are. Scott's name disappeared from company history within months. But mine became the beginning of a new chapter. One where women don't whisper to each other in elevators about injustice. They call it out. Loud. Together. And no one dares to laugh anymore. Because this wasn't just my rise. It was ours. And we're just getting started.